Okay. Welcome back to the Kill Your Ego podcast. This is episode number 2, and I've got a super special guest that some of you probably know what he does and what his business is, and some of you probably don't. So we're going to introduce Tyler Sharp, and Tyler is the editor-in-chief of Modern Huntsman. I hear it called Modern Huntsman Magazine, but to me, when I hold this, and you'll see on those watching on video, it is more than a magazine. Tyler Sharp, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bert. Glad to be here in lovely Sheridan, Wyoming. I agree. It's not a magazine, it's a book, but we've been calling it a publication because if you say book, people are like, why is it not a hardcover? But it's a 300-page book that we do twice a year that's a very deep dive into hunting, conservation issues. Kind of the goal is to bridge communication gaps between hunters and non-hunters with the goal of improving perception and understanding of hunting and hunting's role in conservation.
Awesome. So Modern Huntsman, and if you for those listening now, as you're listening to this, I recommend going out and checking out their Instagram page while you're listening to this. Their Instagram is one of the best out there, and Tyler has done an exceptional job of I wouldn't say hiring, but working with and bringing on board to Modern Huntsman some of the best photographers in the country. And one of those who's one of my favorite people and was one of my favorite photographers before I ever met Tyler and the Modern Huntsman crew is Chris Douglas. His Instagram is Chris Douglas Photo. But the artist, this photo on their volume 5, and I'm holding this up so those watching can see it, but their Modern Huntsman Volume 5 has 2 volumes, and one of them is a limited edition volume that's got a Chris Douglas photo that has actually been painted by Danny Vergas, who is a Spanish artist that is incredible. And Danny's got, I think it's Danny, DANI_Vergas on Instagram. But that's just kind of the history and background on Modern Huntsman. It's a magazine or publication that's focused on not just, Tyler said conservation and bridging that gap and ethical hunting and responsible hunting, but the magazine and the company is much more than that. I love food. You guys all know that I love food, those that listen regularly. And Modern Huntsman dives way into, not just recipes, but, the process of procuring food, the process of dressing an animal, just a bit of everything involved, all the way to taking a wild animal that's been, hunted responsibly and ethically and putting that on your table. So now I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure. This
podcast is called Kill Your Ego for a reason.
Yeah.
And since I met you through Tito West, who is Tito's dad was a bull rider. Yeah. Out of Texas, kind of central Texas, San Antonio, Austin area. And his dad was a bull rider. Now he's gotten into, he's a very good journalist and very good photographer.
Yep.
Tito and I, over the last probably 12 years, have become really, really, really good friends, and that's how I met you guys. Yep. Kill Your Ego. Tito has 0 ego. I wish every day that I could be more like Tito West. He's one of the most calm,
Me
cool,
too.
collected, and I've noticed the same thing from you when you and I started talking that, you're one of those people like Brady McLean was on here last week. Every time I talk to you, the kind of world melts away, and I get more calm. And
thanks, man.
For this podcast and Kill Your Ego, I just spent 10 minutes talking about how awesome your magazine is and all the people involved, but that just didn't happen overnight. So let's go back. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
Let's go back to no money, no nothing, Africa, all the places you've traveled.
Sure.
And how did Modern Huntsman start? And I don't want the sexy stuff. I want the nights of anxiety and trying to find money and trying to figure out how to print a magazine.
That was this week too, by the way. No, so I'll give you the quick flyby. So I grew up in Texas, combination of Austin and Grapevine, which you're familiar with.
Yep, absolutely.
In between
great
Dallas and Fort Worth.
area. Yep.
Yeah, and didn't really have a family that was into hunting. My dad was super corporate, senior vice president of sales and marketing for Pepsi.
Wow.
Right? From
Gotcha.
Chicago. He's a Yankee.
Yeah.
And my mother's from Nocona, Texas, a famous boot making
Yeah.
town.
Oh, yeah.
So my grandpa was a cowboy, so I have that kind of Texas heritage background. And I spent a lot of time outdoors. and just started to get into art and photography in high school. Ended up going to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles and studied film and photography. And just by chance and serendipity, I'm fast forwarding through the whole college experience, I managed to get a job. My first job out of college was in Tanzania. So I moved from Los Angeles after graduation back to Dallas, sold a bunch of my stuff, used my graduation money to buy some camera lenses, some, backpacking, and a couple, safari type cloth gear.
So can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
What was going through your head at the time? Was this all positive? Or were you trying to figure out what you wanted to do in life, or both?
It's actually a funny story. My mother's name is Barbie Lee, and she calls me about a month before college graduation and goes, "Tyler, do you have a job when you graduate? Do you know what you're going to do?" I said,
I love the Texas accent.
I said, "Well, Mom, actually I got a job in Africa." And she kind of paused, and then she goes, "Does it have benefits?" And I said, "No, but the benefit is going to Africa," right? And this is right. I grew up watching a lot of films, and I was always in adventures and reading National Geographic. And so Africa was this idea, right? And so it would just seem like this amazing unknown situation where I've given a camera. I got hired by this company that operates hunting safaris, fishing safaris, Kilimanjaro, photographic safaris, all that stuff. And I was basically just going to work for this company and document whatever they wanted me to do. So I literally, sight unseen, flew to Tanzania, got on a bush plane, was dropped off in an area that's now part of Ruaha National Park. So it's south central Tanzania, which Tito and I have this crazy overlapping background. We were literally caravan, bush planes passing in the night. I was flying out, he was flying in.
This was when he was over there filming.
Same outfitters, same areas of Tanzania, but just different clients. And so I remember I show up there, and they'd give me a little tour of the camp, and they show us, kind of got the nice client tents, right? And I'm like, "Oh, great, this isn't gonna be so bad." And they're like, "Oh, no, that's not where you're staying." They take me to the back, and they have a PH tent, and professional hunter tent. It's still a canvas tent with a bed in it and all that. But it was dark when I got there, so I had no idea. And I've been in some dangerous situations, but I'd never been in the African bush. And they're like, "All right, good night," and they walk away. And, it's just kind of the unknown. And I was like, all right, well, it's been a long day of travel. I'm probably just going to go to bed. So I'm like, I'm going to brush my teeth. And I get my toothbrush and the bottle of water to go outside, and a lion roars.
Oh, yes.
Not that far from the tent. I mean,
what year was this?
This was 2006. To me, it sounded like it was right there.
Yeah.
But now knowing what I know, it wasn't
probably
that close.
300, 400, 500 meters away.
Yeah, and I stepped outside. I was like, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to brush my teeth. And I went back into the tent, and there was hyenas, cackling all night, and lions roaring. And so it was just kind of that first night, there was definitely some fear, not knowing, am I safe in this tent? What happens if I need to go to the bathroom? And I just kind of, had this, which was an amazing experience, right? To be in this unknown situation. And then, then I woke up and kind of saw the lay of the land and spent 6 months in the bush filming hunts. I got chased by elephants. I got charged by a leopard. I almost got bit by a black mamba. I mean, we got shot at by poachers. I mean, you want to talk about trial by fire. I was 22 years old and feel like I went there a boy and came back a man. So I spent 6 months in the bush filming these hunts, came back to Dallas, and that's where I found out about Dallas Safari Club. Right? So I forgot to tell this story. So the company that I was working for at the time, that will remain unnamed, was pretty shady. They were double booking safaris. They weren't paying their staff. I didn't get paid. My visa expired. They never got my work permit. So I'm in the middle of the bush, and I'm never been in an international situation where my visa's expired. Because in the U.S., it's kind of a big deal.
It's a huge deal, yeah.
So I'm like, how does this work, right? And one of the guys who works for the company, he's like, I'm Nashida, Buana. You just put the money in the passport, no problems. I'm Nashida. Like, you want me to grease the customs officer? Yeah, I'm Nashida.
What is Nashida?
Nashida means like no problem.
Gotcha.
In
Okay.
Kenya, they'd say Hakuna Matata, like Lion King.
Yeah.
But I'm Nashida. It's like no problem.
So you're over
it's
there,
like
22
no worries.
years old, slipping cash into your passport.
So I literally show up at the airport. I'm terrified.
Yeah.
He says, just put the $100 bill over the expired thing, hand it to the guy, opens it up, takes the 100 out, stamps it, hands it back. Safari and Jema, like safe journey. And I go straight to the bar and get like a double whiskey. I'm totally broke. So I show back up in Dallas, totally broke, move back into my parents' house. And thankfully, I've only had 2 full-time jobs in the last 14 years, and this was one of them. And I was got a job full-time at a print studio, photography studio, art gallery in Dallas on Dragon Street, which is kind of like a famous design area. But while it was a great job, I thought about Africa every day. And I was like, I just want to find a way to get back over there. So I was staying up at night and on weekends putting together portfolio books, editing all this footage. I was reaching out to the clients I'd filmed for and said, hey, this company screwed me and didn't pay me. Would you be interested in
hustling?
Yeah. I mean, and that's just what I've always done, right? And so I was able to put some stuff together, and then Dallas Safari Clubs, this would have been 2007, went to the show. And I just started going around to all the outfitters in Tanzania and saying, hey, listen, this is what happened. I obviously have formal training in filmmaking and photography. Can I come work for you? Can I come stay at your camp? And there was one guy who just, I guess, had sympathy or, felt bad for me. He's like, damn, that's a hard ticket. And introduced me to one of his clients named Larry Knowlton, who is a hilarious, just amazing character. Now he's kind of like my Bush dad, I call him, like my second dad, because I spent so much time with him in Africa.
Yeah.
And he has an oil company in Texas. And anyways, I met Larry, and his son, Corey Knowlton, was a booking agent for international hunting trips.
Gotcha.
And he was eventually ended up being on the Jim Shockey show and this show called The Professionals. So fast forwarding, long story short, I started working for the Knowlton family. And in a 3-year period, I went to 35 countries all over the world filming hunts for a combination of their travel agency and a couple of shows for the Outdoor Channel.
Cool.
And so through that experience, right, obviously, 14 countries in Africa, Pakistan, Russia, India, South America, Mexico, any international. I didn't go to Tajikistan, but I almost did, but it ended up like a plane crashed or something, and so we didn't go. So through that experience, I witnessed a pretty large gamut of the hunting industry and how it operates. Obviously some amazing people, amazing experiences, but I also saw a lot of things that I didn't agree with and felt that could be better. Right.
Which I hear that a lot. I interact now, I grew up in Kansas, so you dove hunt and you whitetail. I didn't have the same experiences that I think like you had or a lot of people have with, hunting even in this side of the world, in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, out in parts of Texas. But I hear that a lot when I start talking to guys that are professional hunters or professional conservationists, if you will, that there's a lot of parts of the industry that aren't, and I hear it a lot in Wyoming because there's a lot of guide companies that are completely ethical and great, and there's some that aren't in the Wyoming, Montana area. And I'm just learning, so I'm not sharpshooting anybody, but the fact that you guys have kind of focused on really pushing ethical hunting, ethical hunts, and conservation is huge.
Well, kind of what it boils down to is that over the course of that time period and a few years after that, 2 major observations. One, for the most part, the hunting industry does a pretty terrible job of communicating to non-hunters. It's a room full of members of the same club all agreeing with each other, and when the conversation leaves that room, it turns into a fight.
Right.
And the tone that the hunting industry was using was very defensive, right? It was very, hunting is this, hunting is that. If you don't like it, and that's not going to accomplish the goal. If the goal is to have more people agree with hunting, you got to think about the method and the communication style you're using to accomplish that goal.
Right.
And it was very heavy-handed. It was very, this is the way it is. These are the numbers. These are the facts. Take it or leave it. If you don't like it, screw you kind of thing. And the other side of that is because, especially going to college in California and having a lot of friends in New York and San Francisco and LA and Chicago, for the most part, a lot of non-hunters are either simply just not educated about hunting's role in conservation and the way it actually works, or they're deliberately misinformed by what they've seen in sensationalized news headlines and Facebook posts or whatever. So a lot of people have a negative opinion because of what they've seen. They haven't experienced it themselves. This is just what they've been told.
Right.
And there's a lot of very well-funded and well-organized anti-hunting groups that are intending to create that misinformation.
Oh yeah. It 100%.
So that's kind of the underlying observation and impetus for what eventually led to Modern Huntsman is there's a problem here, right? Registered hunter numbers were declining, right? A lot of the so-called leadership in the hunting industry was getting older, and there's kind of this uncertainty of what does the future of hunting look like? Where is this leadership coming from? And then where, how do you reach more people from different backgrounds, right? That isn't just this one sort of little niche community. If it's going to survive, if hunting is going to continue to contribute to conservation on a large scale, you got to get more people involved.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of more or less what the goal was. And trying to present those, otherwise controversial topics in a way that allows a constructive conversation to happen. Presenting it in, a beautiful artistic format, and it's about tone, right? And I've used this example on a couple of podcasts before, and it hasn't backfired yet. So, if your goal, I don't have a wife, I don't have a girlfriend either, but if I did, right, or let's say you're married and your intention is to make love to your wife. Right? If that's your goal, and if you could say, hey baby, you want to screw? Or would you turn on her favorite song and pour her a glass of wine and slow dance with her and tell her how beautiful she is and say, I would really like to, take you into the bedroom, right? Same goal, two very different tones.
Right.
Okay. So Modern Huntsman is the, let's call it, more romantic version of that scenario.
I really like that analogy. I absolutely love it because when you see it from my standpoint, from somebody who in the last, I'd say 5 years, I go on hunts. A lot of them I don't talk about, I don't post about. They're more spiritual for me. But there was two types of hunters to me. There was safari people,
right?
And then there was people that were, when they weren't hunting, were shooting road signs out of the back of the truck.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking anybody.
Sure.
I probably grew
Sure.
up a little bit more like that but there's much more to it. And I've been able to go on a few hunts this last few years that have completely changed my mind, where, I would have been in the boat of saying, hey, why would you kill that animal? Why would you kill a mountain lion?
Right.
And then you see that there's a reason for it, and you see
Sure.
that there's not proper control of animals. There's not, Bighorn Mountains is the perfect example of it. There's not enough people hunting some of the cats here.
Sure.
And you get encroachment, and then you have these cats, and I have one in my cabin that comes there probably once a month, just shows up, and it's a juvenile male that's pretty big, but he's gotten pretty comfortable coming down from the mountains into town. But for me, seeing, Modern Huntsman, but the other side of it is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but hunting is kind of the numbers are going up. And what is COVID and this stuff? And I don't want to get into the politics or anything like that, but it seems to me, just by watching social media more and more every year, especially this time of year, when elk tags and everything starts popping, more and more I'm seeing people that have never hunted before posting photos of either a successful hunt or a non-successful hunt, but they're getting outside. What are your thoughts on that?
So it seems that the interest in hunting is on the rise, right? And it depends on who you talk to about, quote, registered hunters, right? Whether that poll is taken through people who are actually signing up and buying tags, or is that membership in conservation groups? The interest is on the rise, and I think a lot of that we have that whole field to table or know where your food comes from movement, which is great. If that's what gets people interested in it, let's go for it, right? And so especially after quarantine and COVID and whatever the hell we want to call it, I think a lot of people got caught flat-footed. and they show up at the grocery store and everything's picked over.
Everything's gone.
And they're like, damn, I am not self-sufficient. Nor would I know what to do if I was put into a survival situation.
Huge gut check for a lot of people, even here in a state that is. I haven't seen too many states that have more people that take care of their own. They hunt on their own. They're self-sufficient. But even seeing it here, going, hey, I could harvest my own elk and at least have a freezer full of food for the winter, or I can harvest it. I can go on a bison hunt. I can do whatever. But man, the amount of people that are. I don't want to get into politics, but you know, you asked me on the way here, is there anywhere in town that I can buy some ammunition?
Sure.
And oddly enough, every single person in Sheridan, which is a hunting town during hunting season, every business here is completely out of all the main ammos, whether it's rifle or pistol ammo. Yeah. But you know, I think you're seeing a lot of people. There's a gun grab. There's an ammo grab. People are looking at hunting. They're looking at. It's not just a self-defense thing. They're looking at. Hunting and taking care of themselves and feeding themselves, which I think is great. Yeah. That's the hunter that I want to be.
You know, I think that one of the things that we're trying to be aware of is for new hunters, right? Let's say somebody from Brooklyn all of a sudden decides they want to get into it. And not that I'm, you know, bashing the hunting industry, right? Because that's a pretty general term. Right. But in terms of, and even as me, who's kind of let's say a crossover character, right? I have lived in both worlds, and I spent my career in the hunting industry, but I'm also I think a little differently than I would say most of, you know, those companies we're actually thinking about interfacing with non-hunters, right? So as a point of access for somebody from Brooklyn or Los Angeles or whoever's interested in getting into hunting, it's kind of an intimidating space to step into. And there isn't like a welcome mat.
No, it is. I mean, you see the gear, you see the people, and everything that's pushed in front of you is, you know, it's the same. And I'm not knocking it, but every image that's pushed in front of you, that's why I like your publication so much, because you have such a wide variety. But your typical image is somebody that's, you know, 6'2", that's chiseled, that's in good shape, that's got an 80-pound pack on with a rack hanging out of the back of it, and a rifle or a bow. And there, you know, it's almost like looking at a professional athlete. Which
agreed.
There is a lot of hunters out there that are athletes, and it is a complete segment of health and fitness.
I wish I could do that stuff.
I went on my first elk hunt again this last year, and it smoked my ass.
Oh yeah, it's tough.
Over it by Matizzi on the other side of the state, and it smoked my ass. Yeah. But that's a typical view of a hunter to me that you see nowadays. You see that, and you guys have,
it's intimidating.
You know, there's this state specifically. I know just as many women here that hunt as me, and 15,
they're way more
16-year-old
badass
kids.
than me.
Yeah, and it's just they're way more badass than me getting up in the mountains. Yeah. But you just see a whole nother segment, and I love that you guys do that. That you guys cover.
Well, and just showing other points of entry, right? To continue with the wife metaphor, if your goal, you know, if you wanted to get your wife into hunting, she may not want to go do a backcountry DIY, carry it out on your back elk hunt, but she may want to go to a shooting lodge in Napa Valley where you can hunt birds and wear nice clothes and then drink wine afterwards. Right. And if that's what gets her into the field, you wouldn't know that exists unless that type of thing was showcased. Right. And so especially, you know, showing some of the crossover, you know, one of my really good friends and supporters from the beginning, her name's Jillian Lequiski. Her Instagram's The Noisy Plume, and I'm sure a lot of people follow her. But amazing writer, photographer, metalsmith. Uh-oh.
That's Miss Jane.
Red alarm. You know, to show that there's
Cheryl, come on over and say hi so the whipper relaxes a little bit.
The crossover of lifestyle, right? They have a farm, they grow their own food, you know, that hunting for them in a lot of cases is just walking out with their dog. Right. And a shotgun. Yep. Right. It's not this big commitment. It's not this thing you prepare for months at a time. You can do that too. Right. But there's just a lot of different versions of that. And we try to showcase a range of region, of people, of focus, of, you know, species, fishing, all kinds of stuff. You know, and how that kind of contributes to this larger picture. Because to your point, saying that in your mind it's this tall, fit athlete, And a lot of people on the other side, they hear the word hunter and they may have this negative opinion of kind of stereotypical bucks and trucks and 6 packs of beer and blood on the hood kind of thing. And to be able to show that that's not the whole picture, that there's a lot of different types
in
of
between
hunter.
those two.
Yeah, it's a wide gamut. And there's, unfortunately, the forces that oppose hunting focus on the negative aspects, and that's what you see a lot of. So
well, and the other side of that you just mentioned, the bucks and beers, and that group, when you look at the conservation effort over the last 50, 60 years, and it just, to me, I was reading about some stuff last week, and one of the things that popped up was that Wisconsin alone has issues 300,000 hunting permits every year.
Yeah,
that's a lot of people for one state.
Yeah.
Out of 50 that allow hunting, that's 300,000 people apply for a hunting tag.
Yeah.
You do the math around the country on that, and then you drive somewhere. My drive is 28 miles from this shop and podcast studio to my cabin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll probably see 50 to 100 deer, mule deer, or whitetails every night.
Yeah.
If there wasn't a conservation effort, it'd be chaotic.
Yeah.
It just, and I'm not just talking about on the roads. I'm talking about grasslands, trying to manage animals, and you guys get into some of that as well, and not just, obviously we're never going to go back to having 30-40 million buffalo running the plains, but the possibility of not having conservation efforts, what those impacts are on this country, the environment, and the geography, it's insane.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that you guys cover too, is what conservation does in the United States, and I don't think your average person, because I didn't, knows just how important conservation is.
And a big part of what we're focusing on too, as a larger philosophical goal, is continuing to increase involvement from brands from the outdoor industry, like Patagonia or North Face, brands that aren't typically associated with hunting. Yet now you're seeing a lot more of these surfers, snowboarders, skiers who are also bird hunters or spearfishers or whatever. And so finding the right way to start to introduce those themes, that all of a sudden, oh, hey, that person that I think is really cool does that. Maybe it's not so bad.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're starting to involve different characters, and we've done so successfly. And or not this recent issue, but the issue before was a women's issue. It was focused entirely on women and hunting and conservation. Volume 4.
Volume 4.
And we had Birgit Cameron, who's the CEO of Patagonia Provisions, and they're starting to take a lot more, put a lot more focus on public lands discussions and conservation, and you can't ignore the hunting part of that equation. And so we had a great conversation with her, and we're in conversations about, once COVID dies a slow, painful death and we bury it in an unmarked grave and we all move on with our lives, that we're going to revisit the idea of physical events, right? And to have these panel discussions where we take on difficult topics and discuss these things with the goal of understanding how two sides of the coin work together, or you just melt the coin down and make something new that doesn't have two sides.
Right.
It's a common goal, right? And so I think that trying to define that through, like you said, kind of mediated constructive conversation is what we're trying to focus on. But, we had to take, we had to kind of press pause on a lot of the event stuff we had planned this year, unfortunately.
Absolutely, just because the current climate and COVID.
Yeah.
So let's talk specifically about the team behind Modern Huntsman. I mentioned Chris Douglas, who's, and Tito.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about the team at Modern Huntsman and how you guys came together and what your focus, because it's pretty remarkable what you guys do with a pretty small team.
It's
putting out a publication.
Yeah, I had two original business partners about 2 years ago. They both moved on to full-time ventures, and so I was kind of thrust into this role of owner, CEO, editor-in-chief, creative director, photographer, project manager, whatever you want to call it, after our second issue. So right as we went into production on our third, which would have been a year and a half ago, and was able to our financial advisor at the time ended up coming on board as my new partner and CFO. His wife, his name's Ryan Clower. Katie Clower, his wife, is our kind of director of operations. So it's basically just the three of us, but really just me in terms of producing this, because they don't come from a creative background. And so they were helping me on the business side and on the project management side, and brought on, and I can't really take any credit for the team we have, because it's kind of this really amazing serendipitous path that's just happened instinctually. I mean, that's part of how we met.
Absolutely.
Right. And who's now a brother to me, his name is Jens Hyde. He's lives in Minnesota and used to be the editor-in-chief of Snowboard Magazine, but his family runs a grouse hunting lodge in northern Minnesota. And he just reached out to me at the right time and said, "Hey, I know we've never met, but I'm really interested in what you're doing, and I don't know if you need any help, but I'd love to talk about it." And I said, "Yeah, I need help."
And again, you mentioned earlier, just people from different backgrounds that if you met him on an airplane flight sitting next to him and he's working on Snowboard Magazine, the last thing that would probably pop in my head is that this guy's family owns a grouse hunting lodge.
Yeah.
Just by nature, snowboard and grouse hunting doesn't go together. But like you said, there's more and more of that.
Yeah.
I'm watching people that are in the same stuff, whether it's professional sports, whether it's arts and entertainment, that are now going on elk hunts every year. And it's becoming, so it's just funny. It just, sorry to interrupt, but it's just funny that,
I mean, those are the types of people that everybody's this kind of hunting misfit, right? We all have it in my, especially talking to strangers on a plane, with my background in African hunting, that's typically not the first thing I bring up. Even when they ask me, "Oh, what were you doing in Africa?" I say, "Oh, well, I was documenting safaris."
Yeah.
And then if they continue to dig deeper, I'll throw out I'll always say fishing first before I say hunting. Right. And that tends to soften the blow. Right. And they don't immediately just, huh. So anyways, Jens came on board and basically as managing editor helped me. And we would have lots of contributors and it's this amazing rotating cast of just super talented people and a big part, the artistic side of this whole thing is that the hunting industry kind of has these, quote, celebrities and characters that they focused on over the years and who get the show sponsorships and get the cover of the magazine or get sponsored by the brands. And it's kind of a small cast. And there's a lot of incredibly talented people who have never gotten the spotlight. And so from the beginning, we've always wanted to focus on whatever you want to call it, emerging talent, undiscovered talent, new voices, people from diverse backgrounds, artistically, but also philosophically. And so we started to kind of curate these people and, we ended up having Chris Burkhardt be a guest editor, who's a really famous outdoor photographer with, 3.6 million Instagram followers or something like that. And he came on as a guest editor and he shoots for all these outdoor brands. And so it really helped kind of broaden the conversation there and bring in folks from different backgrounds to discuss public lands. And it was an issue. That was our second book. And then just from there, it's kind of been this difficult puzzle of how do we grow and accomplish all these things with very limited budget. I mean, it's a startup in general, but it's also a startup based off of print publication, which is a lot of people. I feel like because I've always been a rebel in nature, people telling me like, well, that's not going to work, was part of why it has worked, because that's what drove me to do it.
And Tito got a hold of me, and Tito and I talk periodically, once a month, once a week, just text or talk. And he said he was working for a magazine, and I said, "Oh, an online magazine." He's like, "No, it's a print publication." I was like, "What the fuck? It's 2020. How are you gonna sell a print publication?" And then he's like, "I can't explain it to you right now on a phone call. Let me just send you one."
Yep.
And man, if there's ever been a guy that is a crayons and paint by number person, it's me.
Yep.
And when I got it, you guys sent it to me in a bison leather sleeve. Mm-hmm. And I opened this up, and I was here in the coffee shop, and it was the middle of a chaotic day, and I pulled out your Modern Huntsman, the first one you guys sent me, I think was volume 3.
Yeah, it was.
And I sat up there while I was roasting coffee in the middle of the day with the Pat coffee shop, and the whole world disappeared. It was me and a coffee roaster in this magazine, and I'm not making any money selling this for
Sure.
you. I'm being more genuine than I've ever
Yeah.
been. It's an absolutely incredible publication, even for somebody like me that's a layman, that's not a career hunter, that's not been hunting my whole life. Take all the hunting out of it, even though the name is Modern Huntsman. Just the writing and the editorial work on it, and then on top of that, again, I'm a paint by numbers guy, so when you have pictures, you got me.
Sure.
But these aren't just pictures. These are some of the best photographs I've ever seen in my entire life. And I grew up in a house where my grandparents bought and saved. It was a big deal. Like there was a bookshelf in our house, and the people listening are going to understand this. They kept every National Geographic, and I would always ask my grandma why, and she's like, she couldn't really explain it to me because they're not going to be worth money. You know, there's 8 billion of them out there. Maybe someday they will, but she saved them because she would go back and read them again, and it was more.
There's no shelf life.
No, and that's why this, to me, to be able to have a tangible book in my house, in my coffee shop that I can sit down and look at, but. The photography alone, if it was just a photography book and there was no words, and then you start reading it, and you know, people have different opinions about Hemingway and some of these guys that look, Teddy Roosevelt, and that looked at, and I know you're a huge Teddy Roosevelt fan, we have that in common, but the book in the magazine is, you know, I could spend 3 hours talking about it. It's absolutely incredible. And I'm about as simple as it gets. I don't read a whole lot, but when I do read, I want to read something powerful, and it's the best piece of journalism that I've seen, or publication I've seen in years and years and years. It's great.
Well, thank you. And you know, we apart from the mission, right, artistically, our design director Elias Carlson, I mean, we're trying to win design awards with this, not in the hunting industry, but from communication arts,
right,
or from, you know, some of those bigger design awards, because I would confidently say we can compete.
You can,
because we've looked. Tito's a student of limited edition books. He subscribes to a ton of publications. We're looking at the top publications in the world and saying, okay, how do we outdo it aesthetically, stylistically? But then now we're talking about difficult subjects and the National Geographic thing. So I should have tallied this up, but I think we've had 11 National Geographic contributors.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't, you know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's.
So what's interesting is now, you know, National Geographic obviously got bought by a bigger corporation, and they're kind of beholden to a certain older model. And, you know, as we've been, you know, Tito comes on board and asks me all these, you know, penetrating questions about, okay, who are we? What are we doing? What is the mission? What is the brand? And a kind of unofficial slogan we've been saying is, we're like National Geographic, but we spent a couple of nights in jail in Mexico.
I love it.
So there's a little bit of dirt under our fingernails, right? We don't owe anybody shit. We control our destiny. We own all of our own equity. We're not beholden to anyone. And so we can take on what we want to take on and discuss it. We're not a hard journalism news thing. Sure, we have some people who have that background, but it's more about the reason and the driving forces behind why people hunt, or why they don't hunt, or why are they, you know, on this quest to improve, you know, beef quality and sourcing and distribution in the United States, regenerative ag and all that kind of stuff, because that crosses over into land use and land management.
100% does. And, you know, I've learned a lot about that trial by fire with, you know, being an idiot and going out and buying a bison herd on a whim. You know,
and there's some people who are contributors to National Geographic who haven't been able to discuss the things they want to discuss,
right,
because they're afraid it'll ruffle feathers and it might jeopardize their grant from the society. So they've come to us and said, hey, I want to do this back alley story that they wouldn't approve of necessarily.
Right.
You know, and it's a risk for some of them. But thankfully, I mean, and we've talked about grizzly bear hunting, we've talked about Arctic fox hunting, we've talked about all these things that if you brought up at a cocktail party in Los Angeles, you know, you might get tied up and thrown in the back of the Prius kind of thing.
Oh, right. Or you're going to turn everybody off.
Right.
You know, you just.
But we've managed to do it, and it's been a constructive conversation. There hasn't really been any blowback. And, you know, of course, in today's world of nothing's good enough, we've had people say, oh, well, you should do more of this, and you should have more women on your staff. You're like, we literally just did an entire issue about women all over the world. No one in the hunting industry has ever done that. but that's not enough. So, and that's just the whole cancel culture kind of thing. And so, we are continuing to pursue those types of things. How do we make it better? How do we get better? How do we improve? And because I'm surrounded by so many insanely talented, smart, and capable people, we've been able to successfully do most of what we've sought after. And, the book is kind of the pillar, right? That's the showcase.
Right.
We publish a lot of stuff online. We have a podcast with Byron Pace called Into the Wilderness. We're doing a lot of stuff on Instagram, and obviously getting into hopefully a new year in 2021 where we can have these kind of physical activations, right? Where we're having a film festival and we're picking films from people that we think are doing really interesting things, not just from the hunting industry, and having panel discussions. And one of the things we were working on this year was to have a moderated discussion at the Explorers Club in New York City between Johnny Morris, the owner of Bass Pro and Cabela's, and Yvonne Chouinard, the CEO of Patagonia. As one, just a symbol of this is what we have the ability to do, to bring these people together in the same room. And then what is the goal there? What is the takeaway from that? And how do we mobilize those followings towards a common goal, right? And so it's not just a book,
right?
It's a much larger thing that my main advisor, I don't know if I told you this before, is Simon Roosevelt, who's the great grandson of Teddy Roosevelt. So I met him by chance at Dallas Safari Club, and I had no idea who he was.
So he's a great
grandson of TR.
Of Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep.
And he does what for Modern Huntsman now?
He's our conservation advisor.
Gotcha. Okay.
From day one, before this ever launched.
Pretty solid conservation advisor.
Yeah, and it was really funny. I don't know if Simon's listening, but we've talked about this on a few podcasts. I'll send it to him. But I was at Dallas Safari Club. I was with one of my friends who's an outfitter in Tanzania, and I had just returned from the area that Simon was going to go hunt in Tanzania, and I had no idea who he was. And we have this conversation, and he's talking about he's working on this book about hunting as conservation in different regions of the United States, intended for urban audiences. And we have this long conversation, and I was like, well, if you need contributors to your book, I'm a photographer and writer and all this kind of stuff, and I'm working on this other project. And he's like, all right, well, keep in touch. And he hands me his card and walks away. And it says, American Conservation Projects from the office of Simon Roosevelt and Allison Rockefeller. And I just was like, holy shit. And I look over at my friend, Michel Mantiakis, the Tanzanian outfitter, and he just shakes his head at me. He goes, you have some luck, my friend. Or something like that. And so Simon and I kept in touch, and rightfully so. He was skeptical of what we were doing, and he's like, that's a pretty lofty goal. I don't know. This is, print publication and going against the grain in the hunting industry and trying to get non-hunters involved. Sounds like it's just you. It's like, yeah, well, here I go. So he was very helpful. He poked a lot of holes in it. And when we actually launched and he got it in his hands, that's when he was like, all right, I agreed to be officially part of it in the masthead, and has been an advisor, a couple times a year. We have calls about it, and has contributed several pieces. And he's really helping me connect on, I'm not a political person, right? But on a political side, in the sense that part of the membership for a Congressional Sportsman's Foundation, when somebody joins that, they get a subscription to Modern Huntsman.
Gotcha. And you said you're not a political person, but... Yeah. Man, if you throw out the top 10 things that are political in the United States right now, one of them is obviously conservation. It's a huge, there's a battle brewing.
Yeah, and
you can't not be political about it. Yeah. on a larger picture.
He got our books into the hands of most of the congressmen, and women. And there hasn't really been a next iteration of that discussion because we just not sure. It's more of awareness, right? This is something we're working on, and there's going to be a point. There was a point. It's gotten diplomatic, and let's call it diplomatic, not political, right? So I sat down with 3 prime ministers from countries in Africa at this last Dallas Safari Club. When I was in Hungary in this past fall, I met with the Secretary of State for Hungary because they're having this huge exposition trying to present the value of European hunting traditions, Hungarian in particular, but also showcasing these are land management, forest management, wildlife management tactics, that hunting has a huge part in. And we were having conversations with them about being their communication partner so that we could help translate that message editorially, artistically to Western audiences to accomplish their goals and improve favorability amongst public's eye, right? So that's what we're moving towards, right? And I'm hoping that there will be a point when we are having those discussions with, politicians and leaders of organizations and things like that, because we have managed to and are continuing to grow this audience, this diverse audience of non-hunters and people from different backgrounds that are listening to what we're saying and reading the things we're publishing.
So I'm going to put you on the spot
Sure.
here. In my style, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm a person, hypothetically, that hates hunting.
Okay.
Doesn't see there's no reason to shoot an elk,
Sure.
a mountain lion, a grizzly bear,
Mm-hmm.
anything. Convince me otherwise.
Obviously,
I live in an urban area.
Sure.
I'm the person you keep talking about,
Right.
The non-hunter that is
I wouldn't
uneducated.
lead with this, right? But the tone of that conversation would be just because you don't like something doesn't make it wrong.
Right.
So I think that mountain lions, that's difficult, right? Especially in a place like Los Angeles when they have names for the actual mountain lions, right? We did a whole issue focused on wildlife management. There are circumstances in the world where you have to kill beautiful animals because they cause conflict with human beings.
Right.
Okay, that's wildlife management. And it's always been that way, right? We did a story in that issue about...
Which issue is that?
What's that?
Volume 3?
Yeah. About Gunnar Gudmundsson, a friend in Iceland who is a government contracted Arctic fox hunter. So if you just say, oh, I'm an Arctic fox hunter, they'd be like, you're an asshole.
Right.
Well, the reason he's hunting Arctic foxes is because there's no predator for them. The populations, if they go unchecked, have wiped out endangered bird species. So he camps out and snipes foxes off these endangered eider bird settlements and gets paid by the government per tail. Okay. So he's not eating the foxes, but he's managing the population and balancing it. And it's this really cool history how when the Vikings first landed there, they were competing with the Arctic fox for the same food sources. So that's how the management started. So he's part of this long lineage of Icelandic fox hunters.
Which is a great article, by the way.
And he looks like a Game of Thrones character.
That's what I was just about to say. He literally
He's
looks
a badass.
like
and his wife's even more badass.
Yeah.
She was in the women's issue and wrote this amazing story about hunting while she was pregnant and how the lessons she learned and being in a freezing, tundra and surviving means that she can handle anything. And these are like lessons she's going to pass on to her daughter. That's one of my favorite stories in that women's issue. But so I would say, it depends on the situation. I've had a lot of conversations with people about elephant hunting, right?
Super sensitive topic.
It's a very difficult topic, but I use the example of if you're a villager in Africa, let's say specifically Tanzania, populations are expanding, they're exploding. They're overgrazing. There's too many cattle, right? So now what were typically wildlife corridors between national parks and game reserves, villages are moving into. So there's these elephants coming through that are killing kids when they're walking to school. They're destroying all the crops. They're knocking all the houses down. And when you're a rural farmer in Tanzania and your annual income is $2,000 a year, that wipes you out.
Right.
And so the villagers are crying for justice. And they're saying, we don't want these elephants here. In the same way that if you're in Pennsylvania and there's an overpopulation of whitetail and they've ruined your lawn and wrecked 3 rental cars, you don't want the deer there. And just because we as a society have put elephants on this pedestal doesn't mean that they shouldn't be managed, or that the reason for that management shouldn't be based on the people who actually live there,
right?
Not from the people who live in Los Angeles and love the animal, so they don't think that should be a decision. And so if the elephant has come in and it has killed someone, it is marked as a problem animal that is going to be killed. Tranquilizing and relocation is expensive, and they will come back to the same area.
Yeah, super intelligent.
So rather than have a game scout come in and shoot it with probably a shitty old rifle, and make no money. They can fly a hunter in and charge him $50,000. The community gets all of that meat. The money goes directly into anti-poaching to protect the rest of the elephants in other regions. And the government is able to then use that money, and so that's kind of the tricky situation there, right? But that's typically how I would explain it to somebody who's against hunting, is that, listen, just because you don't think that there's any circumstances in which elephants should be shot doesn't mean that it shouldn't, right? Because there are very real scenarios that people who live there deal with that benefits them. And at the end of the day, those are their natural resources. Right. And in all of my years of living in Africa, that's a really common theme in a lot of different places, is African solutions to African problems. Right.
Well, and there's American solutions to America. You get into wolf,
Right.
wolf and cattle. Like
Totally.
The same battle.
And over there, right, meat is hard to come by. Right. And it's very difficult because there's so many of people in these rural villages. They can't. Regulated hunting would not work. They would wipe the populations out. There's just because there's too many people vying for that. So it has to be highly regulated, and that's a way for them to do it. And that's without diving into the whole illegal bush meat and all that kind of stuff. But that is, in terms of controversial subjects to talk to a non-hunter about, elephant hunting is one of them, and that's the way you kind of go about it. And to put it in humanitarian sense, right? That, look, if your child was killed, what would you do, kind of thing? Would you have no benefit, or would you have a benefit that's a win-win for the community and solves the problem? So I guess that answers the question. I hope that answers the question.
It definitely does. And that's, one of the things, like, it's super important. I think you guys that you're going after non-hunters. Hunters are going to hunt. Hunters. Yep. And I think the majority of hunters in the United States that take the time to apply for tags and get permits are ethical hunters. Yeah, there's always going to be poachers. There's always going to be people, but letting the general public know, and people that are non-hunters, you keep saying non-hunters. I love the fact that you guys are going after non-hunters, because
sure,
I was one of those people on a smaller level.
Yeah.
But again, I also have moved to Wyoming, so it's opened my eyes. From Fort Worth, Texas. You got to leave Fort Worth, Texas to go hunting.
Yep.
But here, it doesn't have to be a pack trip for a week. People will. Where I live up in the mountains right now, this time of year, every morning when I come in, it's dark, and I'm getting passed by 10 guys with horses and mules and trailers. And, and not just guys and women as well, on four-wheelers going up in the mountains to hunt. So it's kind of opened up my eyes. But, I absolutely love the fact that you guys are going after not just hunters and appeasing hunters and putting publications out for hunters that they might not know, but they are going after non-hunters. And I can't recommend the Modern Huntsman magazine. And you guys don't just, I won't go into what we're working on together right now, but you guys do sell apparel and you sell merchandise, and all of that goes back to what you guys are doing. Everything you guys do goes back to the industry, goes back to hunting. Everything you've done so far goes back to the industry and conservation and the betterment of the hunting industry, which is, I'm really, really thankful you came on the podcast. You and I talked a lot about this, and I asked you yesterday, texted you and said, "Hey, what's your favorite what's your favorite quote?" We're gonna get into more of the kill your ego part of this because you're a super intelligent guy, as is your whole staff. Every time I meet one of the people or talk to somebody that works with you, it's just incredible. But you guys have zero ego in this. You don't ever walk around, oh, I've got this, I've got a magazine, I'm going on these crazy hunts, I do this, I do that, I do this. Favorite quote?
So the one I sent you was,
which, by the way, I was not expecting. Which is great. I was expecting something totally different, and I don't know why, but I was.
So I've had my teeth kicked in the last few years, just professionally, personally.
How so? Real quick, like, I don't want to go into a whole.
I mean, business partners leaving, right?
It's tough.
A 4.5-year relationship ending that also happened to be the designer of the publication. Legal stuff, family trouble, pretty much going bankrupt, just a lot of shit.
Which is hard when you
deaths
see
in the family, criticism from the industry, right? People calling me this or that, or that, I'm a outsider leftist hipster hunter, having no idea that I've spent my entire career in the belly of the beast of the hunting industry, right? Just surface judgments and things like that. And so I've just had my ass handed to me, right? And it's been really, really difficult, but everybody believes in what we're doing. They believe in me, and that's been, what's keeping me going, and a lot of the feedback we've gotten. And so, I think that one of the points, and the reason I sent you this quote was that you just can't take yourself too seriously. And, we get caught up in these political conversations and all this. And then Larry Knowlton, the guy I was working for, he was the king of sayings. And I was being all serious one time about, I want to do this conservation film. And he goes, Tyler, if you can't laugh at yourself, you're going to miss out on the world's biggest joke. And that's just one that's stuck with me. And I remind myself of that all the time, because I don't want to just live, if I'm going to watch a movie, I don't want to watch a super serious documentary all the time. Maybe I just want to watch something that's funny or stupid.
Well, and it segued, like, when I first talked to you, we had a couple hour conversation that was supposed to be, a 10-minute quick conversation. Yeah. And it's exactly like this podcast has gone. You're highly intelligent. It's obvious. You're super passionate and motivated about it. But when I asked this, man, this thing's gone pretty good for you. You're like, oh, fuck no, it hasn't.
No.
Like, this has been it
shit
feels
kicking.
Like, I don't remember what you said, but something like, man, you said I've been kicked in the teeth and I've messed a lot of stuff up and I've made, some bad choices here and there. And I think that, to me, because Bison Union is the same way. We've made more mistakes than we've made successes. The successes have just taken us to the next level. And when you said that, because we had the same kind of conversation like this, we're super passionate, highly intelligent, everything is logical, and everything you guys do is reason, and you don't make emotional decisions with your magazine, but your magazine is very emotional.
Sure.
But then you have 2 seconds or 30 seconds where you just say, no, man, I've been kicked in the teeth, relationships, partners.
Well, and to be fair, I don't really feel like I've made a lot of mistakes. I feel like I've done the right thing.
Right.
Just shitty stuff has happened. Right. I've been a martial arts practitioner my whole life, and I feel like in a former life I was a samurai or a knight or something, because I've always kind of adhered to this code of virtue. And so one of the only things I have control over is how I conduct myself, right? And so I really try to focus on being a better person and a better man and a better leader and all of those things. And so I go to sleep feeling good about the way I treat people and the way I've brought things together and the way we've done this. We've been dealt, we and me have been dealt some difficult circumstances in the last few years that obviously were very trying and humbling, but I don't feel like we've really made a whole lot of missteps. I think we've been super intentional.
Tried your best.
Yeah, we've been very, and I think that's some of the criticisms we get is, oh, this is elitist. And my response to that is there's a difference between elitist and virtuous. Yeah, are we trying to get people to act better and be more virtuous and give a shit? Absolutely. And if you think that's elitist, okay, fine, then that's elitist. But I would say in that regard, it's been, we've stayed true to that, and I can confidently say I've done that, and you could ask any of my employees how I treat them and what our relationship is like, and we try to, and I worked for a lot of magazines before, so I tried to structure this to be everything that the other ones weren't. And there's been a few contributors, right? When you deal with photographers and writers, some people have a different sense of their self-importance. And in those cases, sometimes you just can't ever compliment them enough or pay them enough to make them think that this was a good relationship kind of thing.
Right.
But you just move on from that. And so in that regard, yeah, I feel good about what we've done. And it's been a hard year, obviously. Books are not recession proof.
Yeah, absolutely not.
So, but we are reader supported, and this is something where we don't do a lot of brand partnerships, but the ones we do, we have incredible relationships with, and we're producing a lot of films and stories, and it's all natural integration. It's not this heavy-handed kind of thing. And so anyways, at the end of the day though, right, it's like we got to keep it lighthearted. And I really, when I ask you and other people for quotes,
I usually am pretty spot on, but I wasn't expecting that, and it made me laugh. Like it was literally brushing my teeth, and it made me laugh.
Yeah,
because I wasn't expecting that from you, but now the more that I get to know you, it's literally the perfect quote.
And I think you probably gathered this from my other responses to books and films, but I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, and another famous quote is from Yoda. It's do or do not. There is no try.
Right.
And that's what this guy had. I told that to my team on the call the other day, like, oh my God, this timeline's crazy. How are we gonna do that? I'm like, because we got to do it. We can't push it. We got to do it. So we got to figure out a way. We're going to work together and find a solution, but there's no option where we don't do this, just to make that clear.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Where can people find the magazine? Obviously, you can go to Instagram, Modern Huntsman. You can go to the web page, but talk a little bit about where people can find the magazine, and then talk a little bit about what's coming up.
Sure. So Modern Huntsman, that's MAN, and we have a lot of people say, well, is that inclusive enough? And in the same way that the word human or fisherman is an old word that is inclusive of both genders, right? And actually, Jillian and some of the women on our team,
I asked you that.
Were part of that decision.
Yeah,
and they were like, "No, and that's the whole point: is that huntsman's an old word, modern's a new word. So it's this symbolic marriage of old and new." And so anyways, it's modernhuntsman.man.com. We have a ton of stories we publish on there. A lot of our brand partnerships, the podcast stuff. And then our Instagram and Facebook is just at Modern Huntsman. But yeah, I mean, we have a print shop that Tito's curated where we're producing and selling a lot of unique prints from different photographers all over the world. We're doing these limited edition artistic collaborations. We just released a custom hand-drawn and hand-painted map
it's incredible.
of North American hunting traditions that we worked with. It's called New World Cartography out of South Carolina. We've got all kinds of cool stuff coming down the pipeline with artists and just musicians and things like that, and brands. And I'm sure people could they could take a guess at what you and I might be working on together.
Yeah, which is I'm super excited about. It's the people are already starting to kind of figure it out. With what we're doing here, but we've got a cool project we're working on that hopefully we'll launch here in the next 4 to 8 weeks. And I'm super excited about it. Hunting is becoming a way of life for me. As I now, I call myself a mountain troll because I literally live in the mountains and I listen to the wind and trees talk. And I come into town and I do my work. I'm becoming the person I always wanted to become.
Sure.
And part of that is filling my own freezer with my own meat that I harvest myself, whether it's a bison I own. Or an elk that I hunt. Doesn't matter. And you and I talked, one of the things, I said it to you, and I think it hits home with you. I probably should have been born in 1825 and been the age I am now in the late 1800s. But it is what it is. So that's how I live my life. But the magazine, again, when you open it and you read it, that's what it feels like to me. If there was a magazine in the 1800s to talk about harvesting your own meat and having that lifestyle of providing for yourself and your family and your friends, this is it to me. And I make jokes about Jeremiah Johnson and stuff like that. Obviously, they're different. They're movies and they're fictional, but that's what this is to me. When I open this, it's like, man, this looks like something and sounds like something and reads like something that you would have, all the way up to now, but it says Modern Huntsman. To me, it's much more. It's a 3-dimensional view of the history of hunting in the world, and not just North America. But it's super detailed on. Guess what I'm getting at. If you're a hunter of any kind or want to get into hunting, buy one volume, and I promise you'll end up buying more. Buy one volume.
Number 5 is the best. I mean, it's definitely the one it's the best.
It's incredible. And if you have a hunter in your family or somebody who's very passionate about hunting, buy them a volume as a gift for Christmas, for whatever, and just watch what happens. It'll sell itself. It's worth every penny.
And if not, it's great fire starter.
Yeah, just there you go. But thank you so much. and this isn't the last time, Tyler and hopefully we'll get some other folks with you like Chris Douglas on.
Absolutely.
And you and Chris come down to look at some stuff. Chris is him and his wife and his family, they come through the shop here every time they travel through Sheridan. And man, between you and him and Tito and the people that I've met in person from Modern Huntsman, you guys just being associated with you is making me a better person. And I mean that in the truest sense of the word, not just in my daily life, but looking at hunting and looking at a landscape and looking at other traditions that we get super focused on ourselves.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate what you guys do and what you're trying to do, because as I said before, as somebody who's just turning the corner on trying to get into hunting as a lifestyle and something that I don't just do for meat, but also for therapy and just spirituality.
Yep.
I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and thanks for coming in. Tyler will be on the show. Hopefully we'll have you on the podcast a lot more, and definitely to launch the project that we're working on. I think I'm super excited about it. I haven't been more excited about a project in 5 years.
We are too. And, I got to say, I would have been able to finish this issue had I not been drinking 4 cups of Bison Union coffee every morning.
I love it. But Tyler, and again, Tyler, as you guys can see, is super humble, and he's real, and he's not going to push his own Instagram, so I'm going to do it. It's Tyler Sharp Photo. Check him out on Instagram because he's super talented. The other one is Tito West. There's only one Tito West, I think, on the internet anywhere. And Chris Douglas, if you guys, because there's a lot of people that are listening to this that might not hunt, but you love looking at animals and you love the outdoors and ranch and wildlife and landscape photography. Those 3 guys I just mentioned, and it's not just guys. When you go to Modern Huntsman, there's a lot of women involved in this that are just phenomenal, and they don't just go out and take photos. They actually live the life of conservation. Tito isn't here right now because he just got back from Tanzania for a month. And he spends, part of his year down in the Amazon working with wildland firefighters down in the Amazon, in Brazil and other places in the world. But check out Modern Huntsman and Tyler Sharp Photo. And Tyler, thank you, man. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for doing what you're doing. And
thanks, Bert.
I really appreciate it, and super excited about the road ahead in the partnership.
Me too. Let's roll that out.
I'm excited, man. I'm super. I do not keep secrets well, and I'm trying really hard not to say what we're doing, but this will be great.
Yeah, it's we're gonna light off some imaginary fireworks whenever this happens.
I'm excited. As always, my send off. It's a good day to be alive. Don't fuck it up. And from Tyler and myself, tell your dog so he said hi.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Cheers.